On this video about seams, we're going to do two self-enclosed seams, the French seam and the flat felled seam. I'm going to be using print fabric so you can tell the right side from the wrong side, but you can do this using your muslin. The French seam, on page 90 of your book, is used for sheer fabrics, dainty clothes, baby clothes, lingerie. It's for short, straight, transparent seams. It looks like a plain seam on the right side. It looks like an enclosed seam on the wrong side. It should not have puckers or bulk. It should be narrow, even in width, without whiskers or ravels on the right side. When you start sewing your French seam, you pin wrong sides together. So this is right side out. And sometimes that gets confusing. So it's wrong sides together. The first thing you want to do is sew a 3/8 inch seam. And you start with a back stitch, 3/8. Back stitch at the end. Trim your threads every time. So we've sewed a 3/8 inch seam, like so. Then what we need to do is trim that seam width down to 1/8. That's very thin. So you trim it to 1/8 of an inch, and then you press that seam open. The next thing you need to do is fold this in half right along the sewn edge like so, and we would press it together, and it's right along that seam edge, and then we would sew a 1/4 inch seam. And the basic math, 3/8 and a 1/4 inch, which is 2/8, equals 5/8, so it's still your regular seam allowance. Sew your seam at a 1/4 of an inch, back stitch, trim your threads, and you sewed a 1/4 of an inch. This would be the inside of your garment, so that when you opened it, it would be an enclosed seam, and this would be the right side of your garment. And what they're talking about, whiskers or ravels, if you don't trim that first seam down, it can show through here, and that's what you don't want. So when you turn in your sample, you don't have to do step by step. You just have to give me the last sample, like so. The next seam that we're going to do is on this page, is the flat felled seam. And the flat felled seam, and you've seen this on your jeans, is used on jeans, shirts, pajamas. It's made right side out. It has 2 lines of stitching that show on the right side and 1 line of stitching that shows on the wrong side. It has no wrinkles. The edge stitching is close to the fold, and you want it to lap in the right direction. When you're actually making a garment, pay attention to which direction it goes. So when you're doing your flat felled seam, once again, you put wrong sides together, and you sew your seam 5/8 of an inch. Actually, I'm sorry, yes, 5/8 of an inch. This one you do sew at 5/8. Wrong sides together. Sew to the end, and then back stitch. Trim your threads. Then what you need to do is you will press your seam open like so, and then you will press it to one side. So 2 steps, press it flat and then to one side. The next step that you're going to do is trim the inner seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch. You can see that right here, it's 1/8 of an inch, all the way down. The next step is to take your full seam allowance and fold in 1/4 inch, like so. Press it down, and then you're going to fold it over the trimmed seam, like so, and pin it down. So you've folded your seam in, and you've encased the shorter seam. And then what you want to do is sew the seam right along that edge. And you always want to do a back stitch, and you're going to sew right along that folded edge, like so, close to the edge, and you have it pressed down and pinned so it will stay where you need it. Trim your threads, and there is your flat felled seam. On the right side you can see 2 lines of stitching, the original seam and the folded seam. And when you hand in your sample, all you're handing in is one sample. I did step by step to show you each step. And those are 2 enclosed seams. Those are 4 of the seams that you might be using in garment construction, and there are a few others.